of Hope be nominated. We asked that the criteria be checked to see if we could indeed make that submission. After checking into it, it was found that the program is not eligible for consideration in accordance to the criteria of the School Boards Association, because the program has to be one of Wilson County Schools' actual developed programs. So Seeds of Hope, we salute you in what it is that you do for the students in Wilson County, but unfortunately, we will not be able to move forward with that nomination. I need to remind you that if you have not registered for the North Carolina School Boards Association Annual Conference, which will be virtual for the first time due to the COVID situation, that you need to do so. Our voting delegates are Barnes, Powell, and myself, Fitch, and Mr. Mercer will be serving as the alternate. The conference dates are November the 5th through the 7th. So please let Mrs. Horrison know so that she can get you registered for that upcoming conference. On October the 22nd, we will be returning to face-to-face instruction for our elementary and our middle school students. Our elementary students on Mondays and Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays, with cleaning on Wednesdays. Also, and that is going to, with the deep cleaning on Wednesday, will result in remote learning for the elementary students. Participation in the virtual academy will be continued Monday through Friday. And at the middle schools, there will be face-to-face instruction that will be alternated with remote learning for students in a blue group and those students assigned to the green group. Cleanings will be on Wednesdays, as with the elementary schools, if I'm not mistaken, and the virtual academy classes will be Mondays through Fridays. Our high schools are remaining in remote learning, utilizing A-Day and B-Day groupings, and the virtual academy will be ongoing on a Monday through Friday basis. As this second grading period is ending and we begin the new face-to-face as this semester continues underway, we wish our students, our teachers, our administrators, our staff, everybody, our bus drivers, food service workers, teacher assistants, office workers, and everybody, a safe and productive return to our classroom situations. We will be mindful of continuing circumstances around the COVID-19 figures, and if necessary, take any appropriate action as time goes forward. And that concludes the chairman's report.
Madam Chair, board members, got a few items to share with you under my report. This month is National Principals Month, and I want to take a moment to thank our 26 principals in our schools. Being a principal is a hard job on a normal year. It's a extremely difficult job right now, and often a thankless one. And we've been especially lucky to have the folks that we have who've been with us for a while now. We've been together as a team and have gotten through a lot of things. And this is another challenging time for us to do that together. I know that senior staff is planning some things for them. It's going to be a little bit different this year. We usually have a chance to get together at least once a month, and that's really important. And it's been hard to have virtual meetings with our folks, much like what teachers are having with their students right now. It's been a challenge for all of us, but I wanted everyone to know we're very, very lucky with the folks that we have. They've done an amazing job to really manage things, and again, thankless job sometimes, but they're a great bunch, and we're very lucky to have them. So if you see them, congratulate them on National Principals Month, and we look forward to surprising them maybe just a little bit this month. I also have some good news to share that earlier this month, Rock Ridge Elementary School's third grade teacher, Deanna Champa, was selected as the Wilson County Schools nominee for the North Carolina Center for the Advancement of Teaching, NCAT, Beginning Teacher of the Year Award. NCAT will announce the winner in December, and we're really excited because Ms. Champa is in her second year of teaching. She's doing a great job at Rock Ridge. We've got our fingers crossed that she'll be the winner, and we'll get to celebrate that some more. I also wanted to thank our beginning teacher support staff, Sherry Jernigan and Yvette Job, for their support of our beginning teachers across the district. But if you see, get a chance to go out to Rock Ridge, be sure to congratulate Ms. Champa. It may have skipped some notices, notice of folks over the last little bit, but we usually have grant updates to share during our board meetings, which wasn't always the case. And I wanted to take a moment tonight to recognize our grant writer, Renee Turner, for the work she's been doing since joining our team in March of 19. In her first year, she secured $17 million in grant funds for our district, which is a huge amount. Last week, she was invited to be a guest panelist during a national Zoomtopia conference because of her experience and expertise, which is a big deal. During the session, she shared best practices and also talked a lot about our successes and challenges as a district. And want to thank her publicly for the hard work, and want her to know we appreciate the positive outcomes that her work makes for our school system and our students. And so if you get a chance to congratulate Renee, please do so. That was a big deal for her this week. And certainly that's a huge impact in a short period of time in any school system. But we're very thankful for that support, and having that grant writing support is incredible. That started again from the Healthcare Foundation. So shout out to them as well. I wanted to thank, as we get ready to go back, and I talked to Dr. Fitch and a few folks, I wanted to thank our students, staff, and family for their continued hard work and adaptability, if that's a word. I think it is. I just made it one. And patience during this time with all the online teaching and learning. On Thursday, many of our students will go back to school for the first time since March. That is incredible to say out loud, but it's true. We're excited, but we're also fully aware of all the challenges that we have, and we're also aware that people are a little bit nervous and anxious. And earlier this month, I was asked to speak at Wilson Forward and to talk honestly about the challenges that staff and students and families have faced and are still facing since this began back in March. I mentioned to the chair and a few others, and I had some people approach me and was asked would I share my presentation from Wilson Forward. So with the board's okay, I'd like to do that. I've cut some down, and I'll be mindful of time, but it will lead into just a few points I wanted to share with everyone about our reentry and some things we've done since our last meeting, just so you'll know what's going on. Okay?
Fine, thank
So I'm going to share my screen and pull up my slideshow. All right, shameless plug. There you go. Everybody knows where we are. So beginning in March this year, on Friday the 13th, appropriately enough, there was a phone call from the governor's office for all the superintendents to gather around and listen to what the news was about the growing coronavirus concern. So just so you know, I took this call very seriously. And any jokes today, I'm not making fun of the situation. I just want you to put it in perspective. So to get away from everyone, because we were told this needed to be confidential, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly, which no one ever hangs around out there. So no one would recognize me doing anything else. So I could listen to on speakers and waited for the word to come from the governor's office about what we were going to do. And the word was, the numbers are changing. We don't feel now that we should be worrying about closing school. Right now, we're not going to close. So we were on the phone call for about an hour and a half. All was fine. I came back, talked to the staff. There's what we got. On Saturday the 14th, I got an email 30 minutes before the governor announced that they were going to close schools. So things changed that quickly, that fast for all of us. And certainly lives have been touched in many ways, not all good through this entire thing. But it would have been nice to know on Friday, so we could have taken a lot of things home that were in schools, lunch bags, book bags, gym bags, band instruments, you name it. But that's how quick it changed. So since March the 13th, there's been one big question, and everybody knows what it is. What is it? Anyone? When are we going back to school? This is the conversation that's taking place since March the 13th. And I fully agree, because it is just really odd to walk into a school empty. It's just not the same place. And the next part of the conversation that usually comes up is people tell me, I'm glad I'm not you, because of all the things we've had to do. And the thing I tell people is, I'm glad we have help. I'm glad we have a team to do this. I'm glad with the principals we have, the board we have, the community we have. And our community has been fabulous. And then I get a question about what is school going to look like? And this is not the answer, because school's probably not going to look the same as it was before all this has happened. It may not look the same again. We don't know. Because in reality, this is where every school system in the state has been since March is, so what do we do now? I mean, this is what everyone's dealing with right now. And I think it's okay to say it. I mean, not everybody has the answers. If they did, I think we'd go find them. But right now, no one knows. And you know, I'm perfectly fine saying we don't know a lot of things still, and we're still learning each day. And I think that's really important for our staff and our students and our families and our community to acknowledge that it's okay not to know these things, but we're working through them. I welcome the day when this is our biggest challenge again. I will never complain about weather, especially snow, which I've never used that word in a public meeting until now. Snow, I'll say it again, snow would be a welcome change from the things we're having to deal with now, because it's manageable and you know what to expect. And I can tell you, I've got an answer to snow if it ever comes again. We can handle snow days. We can probably handle some snow days now for what we've had to do remote learning, but it is going to be different. And I've told folks this is a lot like dealing with quicksand. You can get one arm out and another falls back in. One leg out, it pulls you back in. The logistics and the backgrounds of everything we're trying to answer, nothing has been simple. And we're just going to keep working through it. But it is a new normal. And you notice the gloves. That's the sad part. That we're dealing with new normal, and we're just having to work through it. And the problem with normal is everyone seems normal until you get to know them. And we've been dealing with that too. It's been a challenge. It's been very hard. I think people are tired, they're nervous, and patience is gone. And this is enough. And we're still in the middle of it. So we still have to get through it. So honestly, we all need help. But I wanted to point out some things today that I think are important as we go back. And I've tried to do them 10 quick tips. So number one is support. It's going to be really critical that we provide support to our teachers, our students, our families, our system, our community. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, everyone is on edge, everyone is nervous, and there's so much taking place all the time. So I think we cannot stress this enough. It's going to be different. And you can see people now. This is a different picture. I want you to notice some of the pictures I'll show today. People were a little bit antsy about even shaking hands. They won't shake hands. I don't know, but it's comforting. And that level of comfort is missing right now in many of our places. And I think we just need to acknowledge that. I think we need to acknowledge it's hard for our students and our staff, because of those linkages are going to have to be rebuilt. And right now, everyone is scared as we go through this. And it's much like the guidance you get when you fly. Now, part of my family loves to fly. The other part, they'll take a bus, they'll walk, they just won't go. They have to fly. But it's much like what we learn on our flights is first you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. You have to take care of yourself, then take care of those around you. And this is the situation I think that many of our staff feel like right now. They've got to take care of themselves to be able to take care of their students. And this is a real situation for our folks. It is very challenging. And again, I want people to be aware of the fact that this is hard on everyone as we go back. I don't think we're going to need the airport therapy pigs. Although I have to tell you, my favorite part of this is the painted hooves. And we're not there. That's a real thing. But we're not going to have this in our schools before anyone worries. But I mean, if you have this for flying a plane, imagine what folks are thinking about going back to school right now. It's very stressful. And I think it's very limiting right now for folks. You almost feel like you're in your own bubble, in your own circle. And I'm really concerned as our students come back that they don't feel that alienation and that distance. because it has been hard since March the 13th. Our students have not been in front of a teacher in person. They've done a great job remote. Our folks have stepped up and done everything. But this is going to be hard. And I think we need to talk about this as we go into school, that you're not alone. You're not the only people dealing with this right now. And it's going to be very important as we deal with the mental health and the anxiety and the changing routine and what people are hearing and seeing as we go back. And this, I think, is really important. We need to really think about the expectations we have between ourselves and for others, because we are very understanding of others' issues. But I think it's really important for our folks and our students and our teachers and our community to realize that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get everything right all the time. And right now it's challenging to all of us. And so have some grace for yourself as much as you do for the others, because I see a lot of that going on right now where people are being so understanding of others. So please try not to put that extra pressure on yourself as you go back. It's going to be a challenge. And so I want to remind people, you don't have to be perfect. We're going to get there. So it's okay to have a bad day. It's going to be okay to make a mistake. You don't have to be perfect. Be yourself, and we're going to figure this out and get through it. So it's okay, because we're going to have conversations about, what do you need? I need blank so I can do what? And I think part of the reentry process has to be having these conversations and establishing that rapport with our students and families again. It's difficult to start a school year in a normal year. Dr. Wilson and I were talking about it earlier today. It's just always a challenge to get started. This year, we've been out since March, and we're going to start under these circumstances. Even more so now, we're going to have to talk and do these things and ask questions. And I want people to remember, you don't have to be perfect. We're going to be good. We're going to be good. We'll get to perfect, maybe. But if not, we're still okay. But now we don't have to be perfect. We can be good at what we do. Number two, we're going to have to reinvent what we're doing, which we've been doing that since the closure. We're going to have to keep figuring things out as we go. And that involves some risks, that involves some changes, involves some uncomfortable situations. And one thing we found through this whole scenario is one size does not fit all. And we're dealing with that every day. We're working on that. I'm glad one size does not fit all. We've seen that. And I'm glad for stretching so it'll fit, because I picked up the COVID-29, not the COVID-19 at my house, from all the things I've eaten, not to make light, but it's been a challenge. And that stretching so it should fit, it's going to be a stretch for us as we go back. It's going to be a stretch for our kids. It's going to be a stretch for our families. This is a new routine. It's unheard of. We don't know what to expect. So I want people to know it's okay. It's okay to stretch and do these things. And sometimes you stretch too much and you have to go back and fix things. And that's going to be okay too. But each of our kids is individual. Each of our kids are individuals. Our staff are individual. And we have to remember that too as we go through it. So it's going to take some balance to do this. And I really think this is important. I will fudge a little bit. I put a 2.5 in there, 2.5. It is going to be different for our graduates. It's going to be different job settings they enter into. We're going to have to look at some things about their apprenticeships, about job placements, and what it looks like for them as well. So we're having those conversations now. We don't know what to expect. But our graduates are going to come. Last year's graduation, we got through that, but we don't know what the future is going to hold either. Number three, the infrastructure piece that we've been dealing with today on Zoom. You've heard people's speakers go off and on as we come in and out. The infrastructure piece is important. We've added devices. We've added hotspots. We've got green light here that's been fabulous. We've got infrastructure that we're lucky to have that other communities don't. However, we still have spots where there is no service. We're still working on that. And the hard part about that is you don't build the infrastructure in the middle of a pandemic. You build it for when you need it. And we've had these conversations all along with folks outside of our community because we're lucky here. But we need to keep having those conversations about why this is important now to keep planning for the future of what it may be like or not be like. But this infrastructure doesn't build itself. It doesn't happen overnight, but we're making the best of it. But this is one reason why we've been saying all along, these are things we need. So it's important to remember that. Number 4, How do you measure success in this environment? I mean, we have done great things in our district over the last several years. We've come from a low-performing district, around 90 out of 115 school districts, to now, when we did have the last round of assessments, we were 58th in the state of overall proficiency. We were growing at great leaps and bounds. It was happening for us, and people were working so hard, teachers, our students, our principals, and we've had great support. But how do you measure success now? I mean, is it test scores? I mean, is it all about numbers? And I'm a fan of numbers. I'm a fan of analytics. I'm a fan of measuring progress, holding us accountable. And we have answered that. Our folks have put forth the effort, our students have. But right now it's a little bit different. And I think that's still important, but I don't think it can be the end all. But it's important because right now it is about people, not just numbers. We're going to have a balance of both. And that's going to be different. We're still going to be evaluated. There's still things still going to be coming, but we're still going to be moving ahead. But it's about our people as well. So part of it has to be what we're looking for in our vision and reevaluating that. Much like this device here, for some folks that don't know what this is, there used to be these things you put actual physical coins in. Now they've probably got a smart card reader. Now you don't even need them, you got a phone. And then you would, zoom in on what you wanted to, and you could adjust your vision and clarity. And where you looked made a difference. And for us, where we look and how we adjust is going to make a difference for us. So we're all new territory. Number 5, none of this is going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And as much as we want things to go back to normal right now, it takes time to do the things that sound very simple right now. It is not happening overnight. The logistics of everything we do has been amplified and complicated by a factor of 10. So, and if it could be done quickly, more people will be doing it quickly, but I don't see that happening across the state. And it's going to take time for us to get there. And I want to remind people, our own folks, our students and our families and our staff, it's going to take time. Allow yourself some time to do this. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's much like the change we see around us. We will get there, but I don't know what that timeline is going to be. Those measures are now foreign to me. We all have our mental calendar of things that happen in the school system at certain times, but right now I don't know what that is, and we're trying to figure it out. A few more. I started watching this video on Netflix. I'm a film nerd, but it was called Drive to Survive, and I hate racing. I can't believe I've even got a racing slide in here. Can't stand it. So I started watching this, and this is about F1 racing, which is different. And there was analytics, there was logistics, there was personalities, 2 drivers on a team, and I just got hooked on it. But what I found, I'm getting up watching these races on the weekend at 7 in the morning like an idiot, watching these things. And what I found is for these drivers to know these courses, and much like a school system right now, we had a great deal of momentum before the closure. I've shared with folks, we increased performance, we were growing our staff, we're growing our people, we got great leaders, everything started falling in place, and we have lost that momentum from the closure. We've lost it, much like everyone else has. But just like these drivers, if they don't hit that arc at a certain time, at a certain pace, at a certain angle, they lose that momentum, and it affects them in the race. They have to build it back up. We're going to do the same thing. We have to plan for it. We have to deliver, and it's going to take us some time to get the feel of what that is. You don't just go out and drive a car and suddenly you know where all the arcs are and where everything is. That's stupid. No one does that. So for us, again, I'm telling people, I want people to understand it. We've got to have time to find that momentum and get that pace and learn where the arcs are for us, just like in any normal school year, except this year is really different. So it's okay. The dreaded we need to talk, that's killed don't know how many relationships. When you ever hear we need to talk, no, it really means you're in trouble. You just don't know it yet. But for us, we do need to talk. And here's the things I think we're going to be talking about as a system, as a community right now is we need to answer not the frequently asked questions, it's the frequently awkward questions. And that means stuff that we don't like to talk about because it's just awkward. It's just, we're not doing great at this. Let's talk about it. This didn't go well. Let's talk about it. And it's going to take time for us to work through these. And I've already told you, we're not going to be perfect. We've got to figure out where our momentums are. We've got to work through stuff that we don't even have a clue towards yet. One of my last couple points, there's just a few left, is there really is no map. You ever been driving and put an address in and it says no map available? Mm-hmm. Or you're driving across pasture because there's no road where your GPS says, but you're on one? We're kind of driving blind right now. And I think that's normal. And I want everyone to know it's okay to make mistakes. Because the worst mistake we can make right now is being afraid to try and make some mistakes. Because if we don't, we're really not growing. We're not trying to get back into that momentum and do those things. And we're going to make them. It's going to happen. We're going to learn from them. We're going to address them. We're going to move on. But it's impossible not to make mistakes in this situation. I would just ask people to be patient, have some grace, and understanding that we're going to figure it out. We'll have the frequently awkward questions. We'll handle that one. But we're going to make some mistakes. Our toolbox certainly has changed. My dad had a toolbox like this, and when I bought my first house, some folks gave me a toolbox that was smaller than this and had nothing in it. And for anyone that knows me, I wouldn't matter if anything was in there or not. I can't use them, but I sure do like to go to Lowe's and look at them because they look really cool. But every time you do a project, you have to buy something new for that project typically, and that's how you build your toolbox. You don't build it and go buy a toolbox and put all the tools in there you need, because you don't know what you need yet. But as you have projects, you add to it. That's part of the joy of messing up projects. But for us, we're building a toolbox this year, and we're adding tools as we need them. That means sometimes we don't have exactly what we need, and sometimes we'll have to go figure it out. Sometimes we'll have to go buy something. But we're building our toolbox, and people need to remember it's not going to be exactly what we need right out of the box. No one's ever dealt with this before. It's completely foreign. So anyone who doesn't know who this is, for the younger people in the room, this is Stretch Armstrong, okay? And much like Stretch Armstrong, they can only take so much, okay? How many of you know what's inside Stretch Armstrong? Yeah, y'all are some evil people because you had to really do some damage to Stretch Armstrong to get him there. But this is much like what our folks feel like right now. If there's anything else put on us, I am not Stretch Armstrong, okay? But we're having to stretch way beyond what we thought. And it's for the right reasons, for our kids and for our profession. But there's a limit, and I don't want folks to get past that limit. But we also know that the old ways won't open any new doors for us. So we're having to do things differently. And that takes patience, that takes time, that takes stretching, that takes adding stuff to our toolbox. And we're going to get there. But we will make mistakes, and we're going to fix them. Last is equity. The conversation and issue of equity will be first and foremost for a while in our work in school systems across the state. And you can look at it from any angle you want, but right now we're dealing with equity issues as we go. We've talked about infrastructure, we talked about access, we talked about momentum. All these kinds of things are just amplified right now. So that's going to be a discussion piece because there is a cliff ahead for us. Next year we're going to have financial issues, most likely from the state. We've got all kinds of issues going on across our country with finances. Folks have been affected. So we've been very cautious about what we've used our funds for, trying to make good decisions. But we're trying to plan ahead for the future while we're doing this too. School still continues. We still have bills to pay. We have still things to figure out. But we've talked about some of this too. How do we plan for next year in the middle of this year so we'll be ahead a little bit? So I just wanted to take a minute before I shared the little bit of update on reentry. You know, we're going to go back to school. Everyone stay calm. We're going to get there, but it's going to be different. It's going to be challenging. There's going to be some hiccups. But as a family, as the Wilson County Schools family, you know, I would just tell people, just as far as anyone knows, just remember, we're just a nice, normal family. Just this is normal. This is the new normal. And whether your family looks like this or looks like us, it doesn't matter. Everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's in the same boat. And I really think that the biggest difference I'm seeing now is our community and our folks, our staff and our students and our principals and our leaders and all the other people in the school support staff, they're the difference makers. This is why we will get through this. They're really making some tough choices now. They're making some tough things fall into place, but it is very hard. It is very hard. So I think we're lucky to be where we are in a bad situation, but we're going to get through it. And I typically hate a picture of myself, and I don't like this, but I want to make a point before I share the reentry piece. This was taken several years ago back in a classroom when I visited, and I want you to notice it's so hard to look at this now because we so badly want this for everyone in the system. I miss this because these are our kids. And these students wanted to take their picture with me. We visited and done some things. And they said, "Can I put my hand on your shoulder? Can I put my hand on your shoulder?" And to me, that was the greatest compliment. And right now, everyone's scared to do that, and rightfully so. And this is different. You won't see this for a while. But this is why our folks are coming back. This is why our folks are figuring things out. This is why we miss our kids, because this is the joy of what we do. So we're going to try and get back to this, but it's going to be difficult, and we've got some work to do. So let me share with you where we are and some things I think are important. We've completed the routes and transportation for elementary and middle, and they've been shared. Child nutrition is preparing to start meals in the classroom. We've had training on protocols for schools. That's been completed. The plans for drop-off and pickup of students have been reviewed. Classroom settings have been reviewed. Maintenance has delivered supplies for classrooms. Water is being provided by child nutrition. We're piloting classes in 5 schools that will have synchronous real-time instruction for face-to-face and virtual students. So we're trying that out to add that to our toolbox. We purchased additional hotspots, devices, cords, and cases. We're going to have a real-time data dashboard for tracking cases and contacts by school, and it will be live on Friday. We wanted to wait till we got the doors open to add that to our website. We've provided accommodations for staff and documented those. Classroom accommodations have been provided. Open houses at elementary school are underway. They're all nearly finished, including mask pickups for our students as they've come to do that. Substitute modules have been provided online. Daily communication with the health department. Dr. Ben Williams has been talking to them. In fact, he had a meeting over there today. This is continuing to go on. I had a conversation with Dr. Kim Onquist from the WASH Center today. The WASH Center at Forest Hills will be open 5 days a week for staff and students. If staff or students need COVID testing or think they need COVID testing, they need to call ahead, and it can be done outside. They can fill out the paperwork later, but I'll go ahead and tell people to fill out the paperwork now as you would on any normal school year. The reentry plan has been updated, that's daily. Every area has developed specific Plan A and Plan B transition plans for staff, for administrative services, instruction. All that will be shared with principals to share out with our schools. And on top of all that, we're still in the process of having school. We still have report cards coming. Evaluations are underway. There's still state testing getting ready to happen, school improvement plans. The normal flow of school is still going on through all this. But I wanted to kind of share where we were as we get ready to open up on Thursday. Madam Chair, that's all I had.
I have a quick question. Back to your first where we are slide. And you talk about the transportation routes have been completed and the information shared. I know that print media for the Wilson Times is only on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I know that they have online 5 day, every day as they normally did. Will we be seeing those schedules, those routes in tomorrow's paper, possibly? Or will they just be online, or is it telephone calls? How is that information being shared to the general public?
Okay. Dr. Williams, you want to speak to some of that? We talked about that last week.
Yes, the routes sent to the principals at the schools. The schools are communicating with parents to identify what buses they're going to be on, bus routes, times, those kind of things. We had a conversation, I think, about the deadline for the paper. Don't think we were able to meet that in terms of when we were routing the buses to get them out. But I didn't know if there was an update on that or not. No, okay.
Will we get that to the newspaper for their online publications prior to Friday to Thursday's transition? And even though it might be a day late or so, can we make a deadline for that print copy for Friday?
Absolutely. Any of our routes that all of our routes, we can get those to the paper to be able to print at any point in time. But we can get it.
District did say they would work with us. I know we were still finishing those up.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
They've been very helpful.
all right.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I'd like to ask a little bit about the dashboard. I know they have dashboards in other counties, and will it be so specific as to say where clusters are in what schools?
It will have counts of active cases and contacts by school, as well as for the system for staff and students. I can get a sample shot of it to send to the board in between. We're finalizing that as we go. It's similar to other school systems you've seen, Mr. Farmer.
So is that for individual schools, or will that be through the system website?
Be through the system website. Dr. Wilson, do you have something to add to that?
No, it'll be added to our district website, and it'll have the individual schools to be listed by the cases.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
will it also include how many teachers are having to quarantine and how many days they are on quarantine?
It's not going to say how many days they are in quarantine, but it will have contacts versus active cases.
Yeah,
Thank
one of the things that we have is that as the cases are coming off, so as the 14 days are rolling off, then that number will come off and then any new numbers will be added on. So there'll be a total case number as well as the number that's in the active case mode.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We thank you for the slide presentation, for
Thank you,
the lightness of some of them. We realize that this is quite serious, but the efforts that have gone into the planning, and we thank you and staff for all of the efforts that have gone forward. And again, we hope that in our transition back to our face-to-face that everybody stays safe, and again, that it is a productive return. So thank you very much. Moving forward, we are now at the portion of our meeting where the public input is asked for. We have 3 persons who have signed up to speak to the board through their written presentation that Amber Lynch will be reading. We remind everybody that each person is granted 3 minutes for his or her presentation. This portion of the meeting is for the board to hear matters of interest from the public. However, obscene or vulgar statements, personal attacks, and statements reasonably perceived to be disruptive or immediately threatening to the orderly operation of the meeting shall not be permitted. It seems that all 3 of our persons who have written, whose letters will be read, are in relation to our students returning to school, reentry opinion, or Plan A. We're asked Mr. McPherson to serve as our time moderator, and our first letter is from, our first correspondent is from Melissa Warren regarding kids returning to school. Amber?
I have 2 kids in the Wilson County school system, a senior and an 8th grader. I feel that both need to return to the classroom. My senior is actually online on her class only 2 hours every other day, which leaves entirely too much time on her hands, and my 8th grader not only is struggling with missing assignments, but he is a 13-year-old boy that needs to be occupied in a classroom setting with structure and routine during the day. He had entirely too much time to walk away from the class online, play on his phone, etc. Our kids are getting lazy. Not getting up as they have something to get ready for during the day, as they are not even expected to get dressed and show themselves or participate in the class. They are laying in bed in their pajamas while parents are at work trying to navigate this from their jobs. Kids need to be back in the classroom. They need structure and routine.
Thank you. The second correspondence is from Jamie Driver, a reentry opinion.
I have a kindergartner and a third grader. The importance of them returning to school is very crucial to me. Although several parents fear for their kids during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the fear of them being at school around the unknown is scary, but going back to school is very important. No other setting has more influence on a child's health and well-being than their school. The in-person setting not only helps them learn better, but for mental stability. My kindergartner cries every day because of the emotional toll this is taking on him. He cries at bedtime, begging to not go to his daycare. He needs in-person schooling so bad. When he hurts, us as his parents hurt and cry too. I have to leave my child crying every morning because I have to go to work. He doesn't want to be on the computer all day, and he wants to, I quote, be in the classroom with his teacher he sees on the computer. He's at a wonderful place that helps his remote learning and who takes very good care of him. That's not the issue. It's having to learn and do the activities on a computer all day, every day, and staying in one area all day. There's no going to the lunchroom and different classrooms for specials. Also, I can't speak for all parents, but financially having to budget out extra money for care that you normally would not be doing is and can be very tough. My third grader misses his friends, misses the interactions and going to different classrooms. He cries because sometimes the computer may not work, the Wi-Fi doesn't work, and he strives to be his very best. Having faults like that worry him and make him feel like he isn't doing his best. We need these children back in school for the simple fact of emotional and mental stability for the children's well-being. I understand extra precautions would need to be met, and that is something we as a county can do. Give us the option and let these children go back to school. Thank you for your consideration and understanding.
And the third is from Paul Edwards, Plan A.
Below is an email sent on October 4th to Zachary Marks, principal of Lucama Elementary School, and each of the Board of Education members. This email highlights the concerns about the inadequate remote option offered to the children of Wilson County through Plan A. Mr. Marks was unable to provide any resolution to the concerns and advised that I speak with the central office. I've spoken with central office administrators who agree the proposed asynchronous virtual academy does not offer the same standard of education compared to in-person instruction or the current remote learning plan, but the county lacks the resources necessary to provide an adequate remote learning option. Administrators also confirmed that many parents in the county may not understand the differences between the asynchronous virtual academy and the current remote learning structure. However, I was assured by Jennifer Lewis that teachers would still be held accountable for my child's performance in the virtual academy, and it would be in the teacher's best interest to see that my child succeeds by providing additional resources as necessary. After my conversation with Ms. Lewis, it is apparent that inequities created in Plan A and that proposed virtual academy reflect the attitudes of top-level administrators who lack the ability to drive change in the organization they lead. Rather than take action to attain the resources required to provide equal access to education, the Wilson County Board of Education and Central Office Administration have forced the burden and blame of educational equity to teachers. It is clear through the lack of response and action to address these concerns that the elected Board of Education members and Central Office Administration are not here to advocate for the children of Wilson County. I look forward to your public review of these concerns, including the original email sent to Zachary Marks during the board meeting on October 19th. After the meeting, I expect a detailed action plan that details how the Board of Education plans to work with Central Office to achieve the following: 1. Clear communication to the parents of Wilson County students detailing the key differences between remote learning and the asynchronous virtual academy. 2. The plan to acquire the resources necessary to provide an equal level of education to those students whose families choose to remain remote, including A. Evidence that the proposed remote plan satisfies the same goals and objectives as in-person learning, and B. Evidence that the proposed plan does not place additional undue burden on school-level administrators or staff. 3. Review of the roles and responsibilities of central office administrators and their authority to drive change within the organization. Respectfully, Paul Edwards. And then below that, he has his original email to Mr. Marks. Mr. Marks. Okay.
All right, we, members of the board, as per our normal process, you have options in terms of what happens. Do we direct the chairman to respond to the concerns on behalf of the board? Direct the administration to respond to the concern? Refer the matter to a board committee? Refer the matter to the administration, or place the matter of concern on the agenda for a future meeting? Since most of these are dealing with the reentry, I don't know if you would like to have the administration respond to each of these, and we do know that our students will be returning both at the elementary and the middle grades. This coming Thursday. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I'd like to direct the administration to respond to these concerns, please.
Second.
All right, we will ask the administration to please respond to each of the persons who chose to address us. Thank you very much. We are at the point on our agenda where we are at discussion, information, and action. As we get to item H, draft and revised policies, we will be removing item number 2, revised policy 1730/4022/7231, non-discrimination on the basis of disabilities, on the advice of counsel. And we can, when we get to that point, he can tell you the specifics of that need for removal. So next on our agenda will be school-based mental health services. Dr. Mills?
Yes,
sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Dr. Williams?
Yes, ma'am. For tonight, what we'd like to do is give an update in regards to our school-based mental health services process that we have utilized to select our providers for school-based mental health services. I have Miss Amy Nichols, who will be leading this presentation and has led this effort with our Social and Emotional Learning Committee in order to identify, create the process, select, and ultimately move forward with our mental health school-based service providers. And I will go ahead and turn it over to her now to walk us through the process that we've utilized for our school-based mental health providers.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and board members. I would like to share this update on our school-based mental health services. We don't have a therapy pig, but he was really cute, Dr. Mills. Instead, we have some really good expert therapists to be able to support our buildings and as our students and staff come back this week. And just to start off with a little bit of history regarding the school-based mental health services, over the past 3 years, Pride in North Carolina has provided the school-based mental health services and supports in all of our elementary and secondary schools. They were awarded a 3-year memorandum of understanding, and through that memorandum, This expired in the year 2019-2020 school year. Based on here's historical data that we looked at, we anticipate an increase in mental health support needs as our students do return back to the school building. So in August, we sent out requests for proposals. We shared those with all 8 of our local mental health agencies that provide these services to our families in need. A social emotional mental health district team was established in September. This comprised of a school nurse, social workers, guidance counselors from elementary, middle, and high school, school psychologists, our behavior coordinator, school building administrators from elementary, middle, and high school, our EC director, Ms. McFadden, Dr. Williams, and myself. With this team, we received proposals from 4 out of the 8 mental health agencies. Those 4 include One-to-One, Getting Ready, Diverse, and Pride. The district team, we reviewed and discussed the proposals using the standard evaluation rubric to rate each of those submissions. And I also spoke with East Point, our local managed care organization, to ensure that each of the 4 agencies were in good standing and a part of East Point's network. And East Point is a point of contact that helps coordinate the healthcare for our families who are enrolled in Medicaid or cannot afford health care. So the district chose to start with 2 agencies, Pride in North Carolina and Getting Ready, and working in our schools with the possibility of expanding if needed based on data. The team will monitor this data and make adjustments as we see fit. And this initial agreement will be awarded for the 2020-21 school year with the option to renew it for 1 successive year, and which will be based on their performance from the 2020-2021 school year. Right now, we are in the process of our attorney has a draft of the memorandum of understanding and will make any suggested adjustments that they may offer. So basically, we're at the part of waiting for our memorandum of understanding. We'll send the written notifications of the results to all 4 of the agencies that submitted proposals. We'll be getting ready to meet with Getting Ready and Pride to discuss and sign their memorandum of understanding. Dr. Williams and his team will provide some safety protocols and screening measures to make sure that they are aware of those as they begin entering the school buildings. The school assignments for the therapists will be solidified for each school. And we're hoping, it's projected, depending on how fast this kind of rolls, to hopefully start by the end of the month or maybe the 1st of November, depending on how the working out schedules of getting together and meeting and providing some information to them. Even though Pride in Getting Ready will be providing the school-based mental health supports, this will not impact our collaborative partnership we have with other agencies, the other 4 agencies. We'll continue to meet with all the agencies, scheduled bi-monthly meetings, but recently we've been meeting monthly with all of the agencies to continue our work with strengthening our wraparound support services, communication, and monitoring student progress. This is open the floor for any questions on our protocols and what we've done so far with helping to get some additional supports in our school buildings.
I do have a couple of questions because I noticed that for grades 9 through 12, we're scheduling for January. What happens if we're still in remote learning? Will there be no access to services for those high school students?
No, ma'am. Right now, Pride is still continuing services through telehealth. So any student that was receiving school-based mental health supports will continue receiving those supports, as well as we can also contact our mental health agencies to make referrals, and they can do that through a telehealth atmosphere, if that's what, or environment, if that's what the family chooses. They've also started opening the doors to do some face-to-face supports as well.
Okay. And how will receipt of services during the school day impact the student instructional time?
Definitely, great question. So we do make sure in the memorandum of understanding, we've made sure that it's very clear that we try to avoid interrupting the core instructional environment. Looking at times during the day, maybe they could, if there's extra time during lunch or other times that's not during that core instructional time, to provide those services. It helps, what we've found in the past is the school-based services helps our families that may not have a way to transport their student or their child to receive those services. So we're able to reach a larger amount of students by being able to provide the school base, but we do make sure that we try to avoid pulling during core instruction.
Okay. Are there other questions or comments?
I had a question.
Mrs.
Sorry.
Barnes?
My question was, how does the family systemic therapy work? Would that be group sessions for families? How does that work, please?
Yes, ma'am. It is sessions that the therapist goes to the home to do those family support sessions. And most cases, I think it's on an individual case, depending, he or she will have sessions, the therapist will have sessions with the student, and then the therapist will have sessions with the family together. It may be situations where it's just the family without the child, and there may be sessions where they have the child involved, depending on the needs of the family and the student.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? We thank you for the information, members of the board. This is an information-only item. So there is no action needed on our part at this time. Any other points you'd like to make, Dr. Williams?
No, ma'am, just wanted to take a moment before we move on from this particular piece to thank Ms. Nichols for all of her hard work in pulling this committee together and making this happen to serve our children as they begin to re-enter schools.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go on to item B, contracts requiring board notification.
Madam Chair, we have 3 contracts. The first one is Trinity 3 Technology for Lenovo ThinkPads. That's in the amount of $35,656.64. The next one is also from Trinity 3 Technology, Lenovo 300E touchscreen Chromebooks for $68,598.62. Both those are related to the last purchases from that company and are add-ons to that. What we're trying to do is just trying to make the board aware because of the amounts.
You knew I was going to ask that
Yes,
question.
ma'am. That's why. Mr. Mayo is on the call as well if you have questions, but he was very, very sharp in going back to them and getting that back on the list with them for what was available and to allow us to have some additional machines. Hats off to him for doing that. So those amounts are for notification as well. And the last one is Link, and that's for the software service for human resources, fund management, payroll, budget builder, employee portal, and the fixed assets. That's in the amount of $71,318. That's for a 3-year contract. That's better pricing by doing it for a 3-year contract. If you remember, back before the pandemic, the state was looking at new software and piloting software for these back office kinds of fundamental aspects of the school system functioning. And we have made a selection about one of those. However, there's no piloting going on right now with all the issues of the pandemic. And we've got preferential pricing for this for the next little bit. So until the state catches back up to where we were and everyone was before the pandemic, we're not hearing of others making the switch. And so we wanted to continue on with Link in the meantime. I don't think it would be good to be the first ones in on the new software conversion. And I don't think we should do any software conversion in the middle of a pandemic with all we've got going on right now too. But this will allow us to continue on with that and see where the state catches up to with that software conversion they're facing as it relates to all school districts.
All right. Any questions? This is an information only since this is below the threshold
It is.
that needs board action. So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the 2020-2021 budget amendments.
Madam Chair, I've got those two for Mr. Stanley today. The first budget amendment number 101 is for the state public school fund. I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of background on those if you need any. What you're basically seeing there is some of the carryover funds, some of the VPS, virtual public school funding, coronavirus relief funds. And that line item, it's on the back as well. You'll see some of those coming through there. Mr. Stanley gave us a detailed list in his absence. Any questions on amendment number 101? That's state budget. Okay. Board members, the other budget amendment number is 301 for federal funds. This is changes for the school improvement grant, IDEA, and various budget adjustments within Title I, CTE, CARES Act, and Language Act positions. Questions? Okay. Amendment number 401, budget amendment for capital outlay fund. This is for the Watt building and some of the athletic projects. And then finally, budget amendment number 801, local special revenue fund. That's for some of the more for wellness support, some grant carryover funds, substance preventative program, and those kinds of items.
Members of the board, you've heard the information on the budget amendments for 2021. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Madam Chairman,
I think I heard Mr. Mercer first. Mr. Mercer,
Madam Chair, I move we approve the budget amendments. 101 State Public School Fund, 301 Federal Funds, 401 Capital Outlay Fund, and 801 Local Special Revenue Funds as recommended by administration.
Second.
it has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, followed by Mr. Farmer, that we approve budget amendments 101, the State Public School Fund, 301, the Federal Fund, 401, the Capital Outlay Fund, and 801, the Local Special Revenue Fund, as presented by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item E, 2021-2022, proposed schedule changes.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Proposed capital projects for 2020, 2021. Is that going to be Dr. Mills, Dr. Williams?
I'll pull that up for us, Madam Chair, one second,
Okay, I think there's going to be a screen share coming up.
real quick.
Is that what that is, Dr. Mills?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Got it right here. Okay. These are the proposed priorities for 2021. God, that's a mouthful. Mr. Letchworth is here as well as Dr. Williams. Lee Woodard would be replacing the chiller. It was from 1987 is the age of that device. At Rock Ridge, we're looking at replacing the sewer pumps. That's from 1994. Transportation, we're looking to purchase 2 new activity buses, and they range from 1987 to 1991. And the age of those, they'll be replacing. Maintenance, we're looking at purchasing a new backhoe from 1984 is when that was put into service. Or if you remember, that's the one where Mr. Letchworth managed to weld the wheel back together because they don't even make replacement wheels for that device last time we had to work on it. And the last 3 projects are upgrading the HVAC controls at Fike, Gardner's, and Barnes. They're on dial-up modem panels right now, and that will allow them to come into our building management systems to remotely manage those.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
going back to the activity buses, is this, we've been replacing over a period of, is this 6 or 8 that we purchased?
Dr. Williams and I talked about that with Mr. Harvey last week. It's we've had 3. This would put us to 5, and 1 has a handicap lift on it as well. We didn't purchase one last year. I was thinking it was 6, but we're under.
Okay. Where are they located? Have we actually taken out of service some of the old activity buses that were had so many miles on them and sent the new buses to the 3 high schools? Or where are those new buses located?
Dr. Williams, you want to help me? We go through it. We talked about what we're wanting to do is get a couple for each of the schools to keep on their lots for middle schools and high schools for the newer buses, because I know that's been an issue with the travel tracker. They now have a checkout system to do that, but I know it's been a concern about who's got which buses. I believe the high schools do have the new buses.
In conversation with Mr. Harvey, the new buses should be with the high schools. The plan, long-range plan would be as we add buses to also not only add for the high schools, but to make sure that the middle school has 1 bus at least that is long-distance travel, something that they could utilize as well. Now, he can actually, well, I've got him on the call if he wants to speak that a little bit more. Mr. Harvey, if you could join us on the call and just speak to the activity buses. The question was where those new buses are at, or where they will be, where they're at now and where they will be once we get back in school.
We talked about that in the week, Ms. Boyette. Is he still on the call?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute my microphone. I lost my screen.
That's okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The 3 new activity buses currently are housed at transportation, and reason being, 2 of the buses are regular passenger, and the 3rd one has an EC lift. And in the interest of equity, we couldn't really decide what school would get what bus, so we housed them all there. However, they do. With the travel tracker, they can reserve them as needed as it pertains to the distance of their events. So basically what I'm saying is whatever school is traveling the furthest on a given day, will get the newer buses to ensure that they get to and from with a minimal amount of issues.
Mr. Harvey, which ones we had some that we pulled back to the garage whenever starting in March, and which ones of those are at the high schools? Or have we returned those yet?
No, they have not been picked up as of yet. Okay. Currently, all activity buses are still being housed at transportation, so we've been working on those, just taking care of little issues, just to try to get them in optimal condition. So when traveling resumes for sports and field trips, hopefully they'll be in better shape. A lot of times, with repair of activity buses, they would need to be used. They were used quite frequently. This is giving us an opportunity to kind of take care of some mechanical issues on some of the 2007s, which are the ones that are at the high schools. Currently, the newest activity buses in our fleet are located at the high school. But the 3 brand new ones are housed at transportation because elementary schools use those to travel as well. And to kind of keep that fair for everybody in the district, we housed the 3 new ones there.
So those 2007s, which are the newer ones, those are the ones that are at the high schools, but the brand new ones are at the garage right now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would just say, I understand why they're housed, obviously, at the garage, but I would like, now that we have
More.
I would like to see those new buses housed at the high schools, at least one each, so that they would have those for those long travels and actually be able to put them into use. They're not doing any good if they're sitting in at the garage.
Yeah, we've been trying. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. They are available for use by the new high schools, Ms. Webb. They're available for them to use. They're just housed there.
I think we're getting close to having enough at each school that can keep them on
Right,
site.
I know that was the concern, and that has been the concern that I've continued to hear.
Yeah.
That yes, we have the new buses, but getting one of them is very difficult. So, I would like to see them housed on the lots at the schools.
In the interim, until we had enough to do that and to make that fair for everyone, that's why we implemented the travel tracker. So each high school has the ability to see when the new buses are available. And what high school athletic directors have been asked to do is to enter in their athletic schedules so we can try to align the new buses with the schedules and who's traveling when and where. So with that system, they do have the ability to see when the new buses are available. And to that point, if we're not going to hold a bus there, if we know someone is traveling a distance, if we'll make it available for them. So I guess, until we get enough for everybody, that's why they were housed there. But of course, whatever is recommended is what we'll do.
Hence my first question, how many activity buses do we have now? And, don't we
We've got enough activity buses, but we don't have enough that you would want to not newer ones to send everywhere. And that's why we're adding these as we go. We're getting to the point, Ms. Boyle, where we'll have enough to leave at a school site that are new and could be taken out of the county, no problems for long trips and feel good about them. I think, and possibly too, with some of our funding, those are always, I think, going to be on the list for a while as we keep adding as we go to it. The one that burnt has been, insurance has been covering that one, and that will be replaced as well too. I thought that might come up.
Quality of our activity buses was of such great concern that we began 3 or 4 years ago purchasing
We've been adding.
the buses. My goal or my wish, and I think the concern of the community, is that we get those buses out of operation.
Yeah. We've retired some as we go. There's very little limit on what they say reaches retirement on some of those buses. We talked to Mr. Harvey about that last week. And how many buses do we have now? They're activity buses. Robert, I can't remember from our conversation. It was 20 something.
It was 20. It was 26 minus the 1.
Yeah.
How many of those are handicap accessible?
1.
One. We had the one with the lift last year.
Well,
And that's something we've been
if
adding.
that's one, that means that we have one that's available when students that need that are involved. And if that particular one wouldn't be very practical to be at a school, but it'd be at the bus garage, it would appear to me.
I thought it was a good addition by Mr. Harvey last year to add one with the lift. That was his suggestion. But I do think we're going to need a couple more like that, so they'll be around strategic parts of the county. And I do think you're going to have to keep adding a number of activity buses a year plus. If we do have some additional funds as we go, it wouldn't hurt to keep adding to our fleet some. I think we will see some travel once we do get back into a routine. I think that'll be important because that's been kind of thwarted by the pandemic everywhere as we go for our students have a chance to do that. So,
But as things normally go, if that particular bus is kept out of school, it's unlikely that'll be the school that needs it. It'll always be one across the county.
I think
That's just a thought.
it's going to be a work in progress as we add to the fleet. The travel tracker has helped some. I still think that it always seems to be in demand at the same time by everybody. And I do think, athletics, they're going farther away and more frequent. And when I got here, it was an issue with some of the breakage, and I don't feel good about that. So I think this is going to be a common request for a while for us to get our counts back up.
So as we add the new activity buses, can we make sure that possibly you get, like we're having a purchase of 2 for this year? Will one of those be handicap accessible?
We could go back and look at that. And again, these are the board's project. This is our list too. So we've got a little bit of wiggle when we do some of these things too. If some of these projects come in under, that allows us to do some additional things. Of course, we've always got projects with
Right.
2 million square feet of buildings as it is, but this is an ongoing conversation in every school system. But I think we're starting to catch up. But when we had that period of time where they weren't being purchased, it takes that much longer for us to get our fleet back up. So I think there's a legit concerns.
Dr. Mills.
Yes, ma'am.
Can some of the new buses be retrofitted to have a lift added to them, or do you have to purchase with the lift?
I think you have to purchase with the lift when you do it. I think Mr. Harvey did a good job last year of making that recommendation and ordering that one.
And the problem with retrofitting is it'll take out, some of our if it wasn't purchased that way, when it comes to repairing them, they won't touch it if we modify the bus.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Harvey, for your foresight.
Madam
You're
Chair,
welcome.
Mr. Farmer?
I'm interested, I know the other board members are too. What does a lift cost per bus when we put it on a bus? And how many seats does it take out by putting a lift on a bus?
Mr. Harvey can probably answer that one.
Yes, the current one that we bought, Mr. Farmer, we had to sacrifice 6 seats for the lift. And what happens is when we take out the 6 seats, that kind of is offset in the price. So the one with the lift ended up being an additional $7,000, if my memory serves me correctly. That's not an accurate figure. That's my best estimate from my recollection, and I don't have that in front of me at this time. I do apologize.
Thank you, sir.
Are there other questions?
What I can gather is there's plenty of interest in us continuing to add buses to the fleet and doing that. So good.
Yes,
We'll do that.
but, Madam Chair, just
Mr. Mercer?
a point. We want to be as inclusive as we can, and although on the surface you might think on athletic trips you wouldn't have very much need for the handicap accessible, but we have statisticians and other people that travel with teams, and that would open the door for more inclusion of people that might need the handicap accessible portion.
Yes. And one thing I like to point out is in the travel tracker, it is a feature that says, will you be needing a wheelchair lift for your trip? And in the event that they select that, that's when we kind of look and cross-reference the dates and make sure we notify schools or whoever needed that, okay? If you need a lift on this day, we try to arrange, that way there's no overlap. So we try to make it as accessible as we can for everyone who might have a need for a wheelchair lift.
All right. Are there other questions?
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
item 4, when the hard copy came to us Thursday on the purchase of 2 new trucks, it was in the hard copy, but now it is the backhoe. Is that just a typo? Because we obviously need the backhoe worse. Just questioning why it had new trucks.
We had trucks in there as a placeholder and then missed that when we were covering it. We had those in there, but when we talked about it The backhoe was more of a concern.
So,
10-4,
That
thank
was,
you.
this is part of the issue of working on drafts remotely and going back through and some got plugged in, but we had changed that. We just missed that. Sorry.
so since this,
Thank you.
since this is an action item, please make note on your hard copy and replace that with purchase new backhoe instead of purchase 2 new trucks.
Yep.
And Dr. Mills, is the value of the new backhoe the same or different than the value that's listed in the budgeted cost?
I think it's about the same, isn't it, Mr. Letchworth?
Somewhere around about 100,
Okay.
109, but that's without getting it spec'd out.
So the cost would be just slightly higher than the 2 new trucks at approximately 109,000, which would change your overall total.
Yeah, we usually have a little bit of wiggle room with that, depending on where things come in. I apologize, we just missed that one when it went out.
Thank you.
But I agree. I want us to get the backhoe based on what we dealt with last time with the wheel versus some trucks right now.
So that's a $31,000
Yeah.
difference, which would increase your total from 1 million to 1,031,000, thereabouts.
Thereabouts.
Okay. Any other questions? This is an action item. What is the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve the proposed capital projects for 2021 with the corrections to the précis.
Second.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the 2021 priority list for capital projects with the stated correction. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please state your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Now we are at item E, the 20,
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer.
I apologize for health reasons. I must step away just for a few minutes. I will let you know when I return.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Item E, 2021-2022, proposed schedule changes for WECA and Watt. Is that Dr. Wilson? All right.
Madam Chair and members of the board, Ms. Cox and Mr. St. Clair are also online, just in case there are any questions, and they can also share with you some benefits and challenges for this discussion and action item.
All right.
We are having this discussion because now is the time of the year for us to make these changes prior to any kind of 8th grade discussions for students who would be interested in going to one of our early colleges, as well as we will begin creating the calendar for the 21-22 school year. So as you see in your board packet, there is a schedule change starting school at 9 a.m. and then releasing school at 4 p.m. We had a meeting a few weeks ago, a team of us at the district level and the administrators to discuss what would be some possible benefits and challenges. And so Ms. Cox and Mr. St. Clair, if you would like to share.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Ms. Cox.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members, for allowing us to speak to you today about this. And so, as Dr. Wilson said, we do have a list of benefits that we feel like we support our students as well as our staff with instruction. So if you will allow us the time to go through that at this time. And so first, with this schedule change, it will allow us to have a huddle time at the beginning of the day, much similar to a homeroom period. So during that time, it would allow us to serve our students breakfast, which in the past we have not been able to allow with our school time beginning at 10:30. And it'll also give us time to have those social emotional check-ins with our students before they begin to move into their instructional periods with either their high school teachers or their college instructors.
And good evening, everyone, Madam Chair. In addition to that benefit, I'd like to point out that this schedule change will allow for uninterrupted remediation and enrichment time for our students. It gives our teachers a chance to do some small group opportunities and learning with our students as well. And really, again, even allows for some time for tutoring after school for our students who need it.
In the past, generally when there is inclement weather, our students don't have that instructional time because we start school so late. So in this case, we would be able to have at least a half day of school, maybe even a whole day of school, as well as allow our students and staff members to get home earlier in the case that there is going to be some weather, and again, to make it a safer experience for them to be able to travel home.
Along with that, one of the issues that we've had in the past at the early college is to find reliable adjunct instructors during the time frame that the college classes were scheduled to take place. And so with this change, this would permit for us to stable college instructors. It would align with when our more teachers are teaching at the community college and really release having so many adjunct instructors in place.
It'll also allow our students to maybe join classes with other CCP students and traditional students, which will oftentimes open up more offerings for them. Because basically when we go in the afternoon, generally there are often sections just for our students. But if students go earlier in the day, there will be an opportunity for, additional chances to take transition courses and co-requisite courses that our students need. So again, it'll just really open up their availability to additional course offerings that are already going on during the regular instructional day for Wilson Community College.
And as you all may know, many of our students do have employment or jobs that they work. And so this schedule would permit for sustainability of those jobs after school.
At the current moment, with us getting out at 5 p.m., oftentimes our teachers have to miss the professional development opportunities provided by the district. Many of those opportunities begin at 3:30, 4 o'clock p.m. So with us moving that time up, it would allow, for example, our beginning teachers to be able to participate in that and not have to miss that instructional time with students. And so at the current moment, I would have to find coverage for teachers. And again, they're just losing out on that real-time instruction from their teachers.
And lastly, I feel like this schedule change would permit for retention of teaching staff. The times better align with the traditional, with the time at traditional schools. And it also would help with parents who rely on childcare, rely on their children to assist with childcare. So if our students get home from school around the same time as middle school students or elementary school students, then our students can help out with that.
So board members, do you have any questions?
I did have a comment that it appears, if it's like it used to be not so far ago, the community college work schedule for the community college was shortened on Friday. I think they typically leave at 3 o'clock, and this would better align our schools, our academy schedules better with the community college.
Yep.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions that members of the board may have?
Just a comment, Dr. Fish. I just wanted to thank Mr. St. Clair and Ms. Cox for running a well-run program and for the considerations that they're making for staff as well as students with the change of schedule.
All right. Members of the board, this too is an action item. So what is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
I move that we approve the 2021-22 proposed schedule changes for WECA and Watt as recommended.
Is there? It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by close tie, Mrs. Barnes, and was that Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
That we approve the 2021-2022 proposed schedule changes for WECA and Watt. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Farmer? I'm sorry, he stepped away. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, please let the record reflect that that motion carries unanimously 6-0. Let's move forward to item F, board meetings and committees. That is dealing with policies 2300 and policy 2230. I think I had asked at the last meeting, because of the fact that we were policy, I'm sorry, that's a wrong number. Yes, Mr. McPherson?
Are we on item F? Is that correct?
Yes, board meetings and committees. Item F.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I noticed it's marked for information only, discussion and action. I reckon it's just up to us, isn't it?
I guess it was to cover whether discussion led to action or not, so
You don't
that
have to be
it's
that way, okay?
information. It's all three, I think, in some ways.
This one was hard to predict, okay? This is,
I
like I
asked,
said, you don't have to make a point, okay?
I asked at the last meeting, because we have changed our schedule. Originally, we were looking at, we were meeting at 7:30. With the pandemic, we moved to a 4:00 meeting. I know that that creates some difficulties for members of the board who have work-related responsibilities. So the question was whether or not we would be going back to the 7:30 board meetings, whether or not we are looking to adopt a different time, which might be 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And also, because during the pandemic, we have functioned without committees, whether or not the board was looking at reinstating a committee structure, if you want to continue to meet as the full board, or if we have some other change to take place. So that was open, and I asked that we please have some discussion on that. So I think that's why that was a information, discussion, and action all marked together. So the chair is open for entertainment in regard to meeting times as well as committee structures or not. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
just, sorry, Brent, I'm gonna have to turn the microphone on, that's all. Just in regards to meeting times, I don't mind a 6 or 5:30 o'clock meeting time. My biggest concern going forward is that, one of the things we do is we have open meetings that are available to you by the public. And I just want to make sure that as many members of the public as possible have the opportunity to see our meetings in real time. And I think that starting at 4 o'clock sort of precludes that unless they have that super duper Wi-Fi and move for cell phone network and fingers crossed they're not watching the meeting as they're going down the road on the way home. But I think that if we started at 5:30 or 6, that would allow more parents to be somewhere where they can watch the board meeting if not.
And I certainly would not like to think that they would be watching the meeting while they are driving home. That's a safety hazard, and we certainly don't want to create that situation. And I think that's part of the reason that the 5:30, 6 o'clock time was even put forward at the last meeting to allow as many persons as possible, particularly since we currently live stream. And it would allow the public more opportunity to be able to possibly get home, have time with family before we begin the meeting, and would allow them the opportunity to be able to be real time with our meetings. Is there any other comment? Are you open and amenable to a 5:30 or 6 o'clock time change for our meetings?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mercer?
I too had thought about not only the viewing, but the input portion of the meeting. If we change the time and start earlier, it might not be convenient if we ever arrive at the point where we can, that input can be in person. It might not be convenient for someone to be here at the very beginning, and we might want to consider placing it a different place on the agenda. I think we've done it early so that people could come and make their presentation and go if they choose to. And another thought was regarding the committee meetings. Are we discussing those as well?
Yes, sir, we are.
I'm of the opinion that that's something that can be, we need no more interaction than we have to have until we're well clear of the pandemic. And I do not mind, I enjoy the committee meetings, but having to meet more times just is more exposure. And if you're meeting in person. And it might serve us well to consider doing as we have been doing and having the presentations to the full board until we are very comfortably clear of the pandemic.
Okay.
Just thoughts. I'll accommodate whatever the group decides.
Are there other questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyer?
I'm open to, during the pandemic, perhaps meeting earlier, but I was going to suggest that we meet at 7 o'clock. For one thing, one of the most fun and something that we do for recognition with our students is recognize them. And if we move them any earlier, I fear that they won't be able to get here. The parents won't be home from work and be able to get them here. So 7:30 was our old time. We're moving it up 30 minutes. So 7 o'clock, I think, would be is the time that I think would be most serviceable for parents, for students, and allow input and everyone to be here. And I agree with Mr. Mercer on the committees. As we can continue without them as long as we can. If administration needs to have one, then I would certainly want to have it. But once it's over, I think we do have a lot of good work done during the committee work that I would like to see them back in place.
Okay.
Excuse me, in that light, I agree with you in addition to the input from the public, but the student recognition and other recognitions as well. Either have the meeting later or either move it on the agenda to a time that would accommodate those folks.
Other comments?
Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
I heard Mrs. Powell first. Mrs. Powell?
Yes, I agree. During this pandemic time, I think that we probably need to continue having the full board meet as a committee. I think it would be better seeing that some of us are still meeting remotely. And as far as moving the time up, I'm okay. I'm good with moving the time up. I'm thinking I was thinking 6:30, but we do want to definitely have a public be able to come and get their rewards, have the students be able to attend. Because I know normally the parents will bring the children, and after that's all said and done, they're leaving. So probably early and make it easier for them to attend. Because I know eventually we're all going to get back together. We're going to be face to face again. This too shall pass, thank goodness. But we probably still need to continue with meeting as a whole committee during this time.
All right.
And that's it.
Mrs. Barnes?
Madam Chair, my comment was, I think we've done a great job of handling the business portion of our committee meetings during our regular board meeting. But I think that continuing as we are now will be good. And for some reason, I was thinking 6 o'clock. I'm good with 6 or 6:30 because a lot of children do have homework and a lot of them scurry out to go do homework. And so 6:30 is fine with me.
All right. So I'm hearing several different times. But what I'm hearing is.
Information, discussion, and action.
Yeah,
There you go.
Which one are we on right now?
Well, I think information-wise, it seems like nobody is objectionable to changing the meeting time once we're done with this pandemic situation from 7:30 to as early as 6 o'clock, as late as 7 o'clock. So,
Compromise in the middle.
Median. Somewhere in between.
all right. So the happy medium might be, Mr. Mathematician, is that going to be 6:30 or 7 o'clock? I'll put you on the spot with your math skills.
Well, in any time. The important thing to me is because I'm going to be able to manage it any time we have it. But if we decide to have it noticeably sooner, can we accommodate the input and the students by having them at a different place on the agenda?
Madam Chair,
We have tried to, when we have involved the student, we moved that as far at the beginning of the meeting
Right.
as we possibly could,
And
before we got into all of the nuts and bolts of the meeting. So looking at the structure now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they came after the approval of the minutes.
I think so. But my point being, for their sake, they could be coming at near the same time or not very much early, and we could be conducting business before they got here. Now, if that disrupts us and our discussions, fine. I mean, we just, like I say, we can go whatever time. But the main thing is, and I agree with Ms. Boyette, I don't want them to be discouraged or closed out because of the time.
Mrs. Boyette?
I was going to say, I really do like the current structure of having them at the beginning because you don't ever know when you get into the business. Of course, we could stop, but what is going to happen? I can see moving public input on the agenda possibly easier than I could the awards and recognition. But I really like that so that they can come do that and then they can go about their homework.
Right. Let's see if we can work on some timing. 6:30. How many think 6:30 is a workable time?
Yeah.
I'm doing by the need to have some voice and some whatever. So Mrs. Boyette is shaking her head, 6:30. Mr. Breen is shaking his head, yes. Mrs. Powell is giving a thumbs up. Mrs. Barnes is giving a thumbs up. Mr. Mercer is giving a
thumbs
thumb
are
way
there,
up, and I'm agreeable to a 6:30 change. I noticed that Mr. Farmer is noticeably silent on this issue since he won't have to be in attendance but one more meeting.
Do you see the smile on my face?
I see it. I see it. I absolutely see it. So can we entertain a motion in regard to the change of the meeting time?
Madam Chair,
I heard Mr. Breen.
I move that we, move the meeting time up from, well, that we set the meeting time for our board meeting to be 6:30.
Is this once all of our pandemic stuff
Once
is
we're
over?
out of the pandemic and are no longer subject to.
and regular board meetings.
Yeah, regular board.
Okay. Is there, it has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, that following the completion of all of the pandemic issues, that the regular board meetings be scheduled for 6:30 PM.
I second that.
Can I ask for a point of clarification?
Yes, you may, sir.
I just want to make sure we're very clear about once all restrictions have been lifted, that is when this new time will take effect?
Yes.
Once restrictions have been lifted or once the indoor meeting requirements have been lifted?
When-
That's my question. I'm trying to figure out where the meeting is. My thought would be once the indoor meeting requirements have been changed.
When directions from the state would allow, is what I would think.
Okay.
And that is in keeping with when the indoor
And
restrictions.
Because there may be restrictions on something else,
Right.
like say the meetings and so forth.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. So,
So let's see if I can
Somehow.
provide the clarity for the motion. Mr. Breen has moved that following the lifting of restrictions and pandemic issues, restrictions on indoor meeting numbers and pandemic issues, that we begin having board meetings at 6:30 PM. That was seconded by Mrs. Boyette. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please respond with your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Right.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. So we've had some information, some discussion, and some action. Now we're at the committee situation. I am hearing that there is usefulness in maintaining a committee structure once the pandemic situation is over, and that we, at the current time, continue to meet as a full board for all committee information. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So I don't think we need to have any action taken on that, because we will revert back to our normal committee structure once all of this is done. Okay. So
You do need to determine about your November meeting, though. Time for the November meeting.
okay.
That was gonna be my question. Now that we've had,
So the board meeting for
Discussion.
November because we will not be in conflict with the School Boards Association Conference this year. So are we the second or the third Monday? The second, because we do second for November, December, and January. So the question then is, will we go to a 6:30 meeting since we just set that change? Or will we remain at our 4 o'clock meeting as we are doing now during this COVID pandemic era? What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
I move that we just continue our 4 o'clock meeting for November, December, and January.
For November, December, and January? All right, is there a second?
I have a question.
Yes, sir?
I would think that and I'm thinking that, and I agree with 4 o'clock meeting, but we're putting two standards out there. If we say we're going to do it 3 months and then the meeting guidelines are opened up for meetings as we just discussed for 6:30, then we would have two things. And so I'm in favor of, I agree with Ms. Powell on 4 o'clock, but could we do it until the meetings or restrictions are lifted so we can have those meetings, in-person meetings?
All right. Well,
Ms.
there was no second? So.
Well, I mean, I think I interrupted by my comments, but I do agree with the 4 o'clock meeting, but it's, I think I was thinking that we would do it until we could meet, at 6:30 because of the guidelines we established for that. That was my thinking.
So you're questioning whether or not we're needing to do that for all three of those meetings or just at the current time act for the November meeting?
I think I'm in favor of saying we do it until we can meet. It may be all three, it may go beyond, or may be earlier than that, but meet at 4 o'clock until we can, by our previous guidelines, we can start meeting at 6:30.
So
If that makes sense.
would so would the maker of the motion be open to the motion being that we maintain our 4 o'clock board meetings until all restrictions have been lifted and not specify November, December, and January?
Yes, I would like to say that, yes, until all restrictions are lifted. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
I'll second that.
All right. It has been moved by Mrs. Powell and seconded by Mrs. Boyette that we continue to meet at 4 o'clock until all restrictions have been lifted in regard to the COVID pandemic. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes? Mrs. Barnes?
Aye. I was muted, aye.
Okay, and myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item G, revised policy 2302, remote participation in board meetings. I too raised the question in regard to our policy, in that we had an item that said, item 4, that said no board member may participate remotely more than 3 times during a calendar year. However, in justifiable circumstances, the board may by 2/3 vote agree to waive this limitation. In having this come back to us, legal counsel has just seen fit to strike item 4 in totality, removing that 3 times during a calendar year. And it is, this one again is marked information, discussion, and action. So what is the pleasure? I think we had put that in so as to not have anybody to, thank you, to take advantage of a remote meeting opportunity. But because we are in pandemic and we have, my suggestion was that we just suspend the utilization of that 3-meeting rule until after the pandemic situation, because the persons who are meeting remotely for the meetings have been persons who have the underlying conditions that made them more vulnerable. And so that was the reason that I was asking for a suspension of that number, not the total striking of that particular paragraph of the policy. So it is up to the board, and we were going to look at that again as a first read, since they were striking that as not as a second read. But
due to the way this panel is written, couldn't we just have the 2/3 vote?
I was thinking the same thing.
all right,
And now, but my question was, can we have a 2/3 vote that is not each time, but go ahead and say
during this pandemic,
during the pandemic and have a 2/3 vote, which would allow that. And because I think the day may come, I certainly not with the group we have now, but when someone's at the beach and they must decide, well, there's nothing to keep it from it, I'll just tell them I want to be online, so I'd stay at the beach. I prefer it being in there, but I also prefer making allowances for the current situation. And certainly allowances could be made for the next situation that comes up, be it soon or way away from that. But I agree with Mr. Breen. But I didn't want to have the vote every time.
right. Mr. McPherson?
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Mr. Mercer. I think this is, when this language was written, I believe this board could, with 2/3 vote, put in place a suspension of the activation of this particular provision until the end of the pandemic, and that would be completely sufficient without regard to having to strike it. My opinion would be that that's what this board should do, but that's, once again, that's my opinion.
I wasn't looking for it to be stricken when I
I didn't
raised the
think you
question.
were.
And I asked about
Suspension.
having a suspension of that particular paragraph. So I was not looking for that paragraph to be stricken.
No.
So if we have a motion that we suspend that particular paragraph, then bringing this forth as a first read would not be necessary, because the provision is already there for a 2/3 vote.
That's correct, Madam
All
Chair.
right.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
I move that we vote to waive the limitation on that no board member may participate remotely more than 3 times during a calendar year until we are meeting at 6:30.
All right.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, that we waive, that we waive or suspend the paragraph of policy 2302, that no board member may participate remotely more than 3 times during the calendar year. however, in justifiable circumstances. So this is a justifiable circumstance in that we waive or suspend this paragraph until after the end of the pandemic situation. If I
Madam
ever
Chair.
made that. Yes, Mr. Mercer, Mr. Mercer.
And I agree and support that motion, but could, instead of the 6:30 meeting, could we put until there is, not a continued threat? Because they may lift all of that and we might can meet, and still there might be the circumstance with the, people that are electing to be remote at this time. I'm saying, I don't know if when we go to 6:30 meetings is going to coincide when these people feel like they're beyond the threat to be here in person.
Is the maker of the motion agreeable to the friendly amendment or comment that Mr. Mercer is stating?
I'd be agreeable with that. But then, I mean, it states within the calendar year, so, I mean, it'd be up.
In another
We could
2
do it
months.
again in January,
Mhm.
if we needed to.
Right. Because the calendar year will be up in another 2 months, right?
That almost gives them from this point 3 months at the end of this year and 3 months next, 3 times the next.
Well, we hope that this pandemic is going to be.
Yeah, I hope it's going to
be
wait before
done.
then.
All right, is there any other discussion? So am I free to leave the motion as it was presented until
I
the
have no
6:30?
problem. I have no
Okay,
problem
until
with
the
that.
6:30 meetings begin. So is everybody clear on the motion? Wonderful. So please record your vote, Mrs. Boyette.
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
myself, Dr. Fitch, I let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
I think we need to have, is that the vote, or is that just the vote to have the vote?
No, that was the vote.
Okay.
Because we don't have to alter the policy. The policy continues just as it is, right?
That's right. That's right, Mr. Boyd.
And because we're almost at the end of the calendar year anyway.
Well, I just wanted to make sure procedurally we didn't have to have the second 2/3 vote after my motion to have the 2/3 vote. If that makes sense. Because the 2/3 vote wasn't on the calendar, it wasn't on the agenda. Does that make sense?
Well, this was up for information, discussion, and action. So we
got it all
were free
covered
to
over
take an
the
action on this, and we're not altering the policy. So therefore, that first read on that is moot.
I agree. I just want to make sure the man in the suit is satisfied.
All right.
I hear you. Yeah, I think because the pre-C sheet, we're okay.
Okay. So now we're on the draft and revised policies, which are all second reads. Would you like to, I'm sorry, Mr. McPherson, would you please discuss item 2, revised policy 1730, 4022, 7231, non-discrimination on the basis of disabilities that you are asking for removal?
Yes, Madam Chair. Board, if you'll take a look at the second policy listed, revised policy 1730, 4022, 7231, non-discrimination on the basis of disabilities. The proposed revision was put forward as part of the School Boards Association's revisions. However, because this board did not adopt a variation of the School Boards Association's policies, this revision is not necessary for the board to adopt. Your policy is just fine as is and does not need to be revised.
All right. Members of the board, do you have any questions to the board attorney in regard to the removal of this policy as it actually is not being revised, but is as currently stands. All right.
But so by just taking no action on that one, that takes care of it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Is your pleasure to act on these policies individually, or would you like to act on them collectively?
Collectively, from my opinion.
Collectively.
Then the chair will entertain a motion to that regard.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
I move that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda of the Roman numeral 7, discussion action items on the page draft of revised policies 1, then 3 through 14 is the second reading of the field corresponding policies set forth in the handout dated October 19th, 2020.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, that the board act in unison, in regard to policy, in regard to agenda item 7, item H, subparagraphs 1, 3 through 14 of the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please respond with your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. These policies are now approved. Members of the board, I think there were policies that have to be removed since, in light of the fact that we have just passed these policies. No?
It was a part of Mr. Breen's motion.
Oh, I'm sorry that I didn't clearly restate his motion then.
It was the repeal.
And that the other policies be repealed as presented in the handout. Is that what it was? Mr. McPherson, do I have to go back and restate that motion fully and then take another vote, or are we okay with?
We're okay.
Okay, fine. So please note that those policies that were listed to be repealed are now repealed in light of the fact that we just passed those policies of the agenda. I did have one quick question for the administration. The administrative regulations we understood were not to be, they were information, but in the minutes that we approved of the last meeting, there were a couple of changes that were being asked for in Administrative Regulation 3226/4205, which is Internet Safety, and AR 3227-7322, Web Page Development. Will we at least see possibly at the next board meeting what those minor changes were? There were some changes that were asked for on the 12th. There was some slight verbiage
We can
changes.
rotate those too.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
All right. Given that, Mr. Farmer,
Madam Chairman,
yes,
I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321, to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20, United States Code 1232G, to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and/or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Please record your vote. Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned to closed session. Members of the board.